I want people to dream and have really big dreams, aspire to greatness. When you're 20, your
Hmm.
career is going to be 30 plus years. Probably, I'll give myself like an 88% goodness at time management experience that completely shaped how I saw the world. People and relationships are really, really important. You need people to support you, you need people to advise you, you need people to give you tough messages.
I will tell you a brief about what I'm trying to do with this initiative. This is my personal initiative, has nothing to do with Advent Health.
Mhm.
What I'm trying to do is to interview different people who have done great in their career, is specifically around the career. So what they wanted. So I start with what they wanted to become in when they were in high school, and then their career journey from first job to where they are right now, and the goal setting method, how they identify their dreams, how they achieve their dreams, and the message to the audience. So it's kind of pretty simple
Yeah.
format, but when we start talking about it, there are always something, either a situation or a person, something happened, something that affected the path uh, to for you to reach where you are.
Cool. I have plenty of those.
Awesome. And
Plenty.
my hope is that I post these videos on YouTube, and my hope is that people who are in their early career will see this, will learn from many other interviews, plus this interview, that what they decide in their early career doesn't mean that they have to stick to that. It's life is a long like marathon, and you evaluate your option. You learn that you can achieve anything. Just follow what you want to become, and follow the opportunity that comes across.
Yeah, I love it. I
So
love
let's start with first question. What you wanted to become when you was in high school?
my interest in high school was engineering. I was really good at math, and I thought maybe, like aeronautical engineering. I had an interest in being an astronaut. I don't know
Okay.
where that came from. And the wisdom of my parents, we went to a conference for the Society of Women Engineers, and I learned about engineering. And I hung out with a lot of also juniors in high school that thought about engineering.
Mhm.
To be honest, it scared me off. And
Engineering.
it did. And part of it was the depth of math, part of it was as a woman, plenty of people kept telling me if you ever leave, the field of engineering progresses. It can be really hard to re enter. And they're talking about things like going and having a family.
Oh, I see.
I did not end up pursuing engineering in college. I ended up pursuing accounting. My mom had been a bookkeeper, and because I was good at math, business made sense. Accounting is, a place that there were a lot of very clear career opportunities, and that ended up being my intention as a freshman in college, and how I ended up pursuing my bachelor's degree.
Okay. And were you doing any internship while you was in college?
I did several. I had part-time jobs, like maybe the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. And over the holidays, I would work. My mom worked for a small company. And so I would go in and do that. And then I was very fortunate. I had an internship between my my sophomore and junior year. So I applied for an internship actually with the US government in kind of the agency that's the auditing function. And really, I did not anticipate getting it, and I did. And so I had a really robust internship before my junior year of college. And I do think that that was formative for me because I got to work in a professional setting. I got to, work on what I know now, and I didn't know it at the time, is that they were more consulting projects than auditing projects.
Okay.
And I think that's something we can, speak about, because I think it reshaped the way that I probably thought about business and the type of work that I liked doing. Because a lot of people who do accounting, they either go into auditing, which they now call assurance, or tax, or risk. And my internship was really much more consulting oriented. And then between my junior and senior year, I actually studied abroad, and I didn't do an internship that year.
Okay.
Pros and cons to that as well. But that's probably another experience that completely shaped how I saw the world, because the world, I went to the UK. It was an international program at the London School of Economics. I just saw a world that I had never been exposed to, because I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Kansas City and went to school at the University of Kansas. So like those, I sort of did an inversion of what a lot of college students do. Internship first, then study abroad. A lot of students do them in reverse. But I think both of those experiences were very, very powerful, not only in my first job after college, but just so many things that went on years later.
Okay. All right. So moving to the first job. So how did you get the first job? What was that?
Yeah. So my first job, because I was an accounting major, I recruited with a lot of the accounting firms. And for me, that ended up not having a positive outcome. So I had to look at different corporate roles that were going to use my background in accounting. It was very interesting, so this is the mid 90s, actually the early 90s. And when I looked at companies, I was looking at companies in Kansas City, companies that had need for accounting backgrounds. And I looked at a number of big companies, people like Hallmark, people like Cargill.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up interviewing with a company called Sprint. And some of you may never have heard of them, but at the time, they were the third largest telecommunications company in the United States. They were growing rapidly. And what happened at the time with Sprint, they had an internal audit function. They had brought in new leaders, and they were trying to transform their internal audit function to be much more like an internal consulting function, and then also a leadership development program for the rest of the company. I went there. It was fantastic. It was well beyond what I would have expected as a first job, because number one, they had a huge amount of talent they had brought in from other companies who were at the time leaders in different industries, who cared a lot about employee development. So that was a big thing. Yeah. The second thing is I got to do projects all over the company. And I saw every facet. I saw different divisions, different business units, different functional areas. Because Sprint was a telecom company, we worked in their network operations. We had to work in their areas that dealt with IT, like billing, human resource systems, supply chain. And by the time I left that group, and I was there 3.5 years, I was promoted twice. I probably worked on maybe 40 different projects. I mean, we would do stuff very, very quickly. I worked with leaders at all levels. One of my big engagements, we actually delivered our final project to the corporate CFO. So I got to present to a senior executive, and I'm probably 22 years old.
And the Sprint CFO, meaning big deal.
Yeah, a big deal. And I mean, to literally present, like he went around the room,
Uh-huh.
person by person, asking us to explain our work and the impact of it. And I think what I know now that I didn't know at the time was that I was getting all of these foundational skills. And part of it was because the managers that I work with gave a lot of feedback. After we would meet with people, they would sit down. I might be working with a manager who would say, "Hey, let me give you a couple of points that might have helped that meeting."
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you're working on this analysis. Here's some things that you could think about a little bit differently that might shape it. So it's not just the job and the work, but it was very much the people that cared about, whether you want to call it mentoring or feedback. Not all of it was wonderful, by the way. I mean, some of these folks were harsh and difficult, but I think it gave me a lot of confidence. It gave me a lot of breadth in my skill set. It gave me a lot of exposure to business issues. And, ultimately, when I left that job, it was because I was selected to go into one of our internal leadership development programs. So each year they selected, maybe 15 employees from the finance organization that went into a leadership development program.
Okay.
And because I had a lot of, if you would, sponsorship from the organization, I was nominated to go into that program. And then, the cycle began again, except I had 3 9 to 12 month assignments, but under close mentorship of some of the even more senior leaders of the organization.
Okay.
And I would say, Vinod, like the thing that I don't think is much different today than, I mean, this was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
I had to learn a lot of stuff on my own. I had to learn communication skills. I had to put together PowerPoint presentations. I worked with databases. I mean, I did data science before it was called data science. Very, very proficient in Excel. I used Access then. Today the tools are a little bit more sophisticated.
Yeah.
But, you were kind of put in these situations where you're being asked to do something and you're just trying to figure out a toolkit. And as a business person, I still needed to develop technical skills. Mm-hmm. And I think it's something when I work with technical people who are trying to move into business roles, you're always trying to push your boundaries a little bit. And the nature of the work I did somewhat forced that. And it was hard and it was fun. When I left the rotational program, I took a more sophisticated finance role. I worked on a joint venture that Sprint had with 2 European telecom companies, very global, very culturally immersive, tons of conflict, which served me later. And then I took a role where I was dealing with kind of the financial decision-making side of some of the investment we were making in emerging technology. And this is the thing that, again, when I think about young people, at that time, mobile phones didn't exist. The internet, this is, again, like the middle 90s at this point. The internet didn't exist. We didn't have Wi-Fi. We didn't have streaming. But Sprint was one of the companies that was building that foundation.
I remember 1998, I believe, when they have this big cell phone.
Yes. And Sprint was one of the first companies to begin. They invested billions in the mobile auctions. And, I think when I reflect on that, so one, being a part of emerging technology is really interesting.
Mhm.
But again, I was the business person, but I was constantly trying to understand some of the really technical things and how to deal with ambiguity because nobody knew if anybody was going to buy that stuff. I worked on a project, and again, young people will never know about this, but it was called Iridium, and it was satellite-based mobile phones. And a company called Motorola shot up satellites, and then Sprint was providing the connectivity on the Earth.
I think it was around the same time, right?
Yes.
1998,
Yes.
99. Believe it
Exactly.
or not, 1999, 8, 9, during that part, I completed my engineering and engineering telecommunication,
Oh,
electronic
cool.
and telecommunication,
Yeah.
and I could not find a job. Everybody was asking like 3 to 4 years of experience, and I said, "Give me the job so that I can get an experience."
Yes.
So my
Yeah.
father always says that instead of waiting for a perfect job, get a job that is available. So I got a job is more like EPBX technician, which is more like intercom. There used to be intercom in a small offices at that time. So I became technician and they promoted me. They asked me that you have good education. Why don't you sell instead of fix it? And then from there, I started selling cellular plans,
Yeah.
a Sprint
Yeah.
plan. And
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
In India, and it was really hard to convince anyone that why do they have to pay for incoming calls also.
Yes. Well, and you're talking about, I mean, it's essentially the same thing that happened to me. I wanted to be an accountant. I wanted to go work for an accounting firm. I didn't get that job.
Yeah.
I ended up at Sprint. I spent 7.5 years there. I had 8 different roles. I was at the forefront of emerging technology that's all a part of the stuff that we use today. And when I moved forward, I mean, I left Sprint. I went to work for a company called WorldCom that is more known for the biggest corporate fraud ever committed up until other companies, but that's a whole. And then I went and I started my MBA at the University of Chicago. And then I went into consulting, and all of those things made the experiences later, I think I had a much more robust skill set. And it really comes down to what you were describing. Yeah, I had this grand plan and I had ABC all mapped out for my
Yeah.
career in my 20s. It completely disappeared at A. But was I disappointed? For sure, I was disappointed. But did I make the most of it? Did I land with an amazing opportunity?
Mhm.
Absolutely. And then once in that opportunity, you're trying to make choices to get great skills and great experience. And
Yeah.
I think, my time at Sprint, it wasn't by design. It was about looking at things and saying, wow, that might be really interesting to be a part of. I don't have international experience. Maybe I ought to work in that area. I don't have supply chain experience. Maybe I should work in that area. I don't have experience with new technology. Maybe I should work in that area. And I think for somebody, early in their career, trying to build this portfolio
Uh-huh.
and work with people that are going to help you learn, that want you to grow and develop. They don't want to put you on their team and kind of keep you there forever.
Yeah.
And then, when I went into strategy consulting, like a lot of MBAs, so I went to the University of Chicago. I was very, very fortunate. That was a designed choice. I only applied to one business school. And some of it was because I had a very robust business background. I wanted to be a little bit more discerning in the courses that I took. I didn't want to have to take a standard curriculum, which is something that Chicago allows. I thought I wanted to be a CFO because I really loved finance. So why not go to Chicago? It was, I was from the Midwest. I liked Chicago. And I was an MBA student from 1997 to 1999, which was a really, again, I'm showing how old I am, but it was a time, it was a time of a lot of disruption, a lot of craziness. I chose an MBA program that would allow me to learn things really fundamentally. And, there's a lot of things I could say about Chicago, which were important, but there were two things that came out of it. One is I met great people, my peers. That's super critical. And then secondly, academically, I got a lot of theory that then I could apply later in my work. And when I was about, maybe halfway through the program, I realized that finance was not my interest.
Okay.
I took a bunch of strategy classes. I took economics. I took marketing. And all of a sudden, that desire to be a CFO sort of diminished. And now the world of strategy opened up to me. And like many MBAs, I thought, well, I should go be a consultant. I should go be a strategy consultant. And like many MBAs, I went and recruited. I went and, went to all the events, right? They have all these different, presentations, and you get to meet the firms. And this is probably something that shaped my future forever. I did not feel connected to the consulting firms that were larger firms that have the big brand names. I think it was a combination of knowing myself. I had worked in roles where we had consultants come in. I maybe saw the angel and the devil side of consulting firms. And the firms that I was more attracted to had parts of their ethos that dealt with the actual implementation side of projects. So I didn't interview with the big firms. I didn't talk to firms like McKinsey or the Boston Consulting Group. By the way, another important thing that I think for people early in their career, I had consultants tell me I would never get a consulting job. And it largely came from one specific thing. I did not have a super high GMAT score. And I literally remember one person, I'm like visualizing that person right now. And they're like, Pam, you're not going to be able to get a consulting job.
They check GMAT score?
Yeah, the GMAT, because MBAs, to get into top elite MBA programs, you take the GMAT. And for other graduate programs, it might be a GRE. At the time, and really until, frankly, COVID, the GMAT score was a big decision factor for many of these selective consulting firms. I think, and you were asking me at the start about those moments. I think that person, it had two effects on me. So one was, well, I'm going to prove that person wrong. I'm going to go get a consulting job. But I think also it reinforced a little bit of my own thinking about not going after some of those larger, the elite firms, because I didn't want to fail at it. But to me, it wasn't a choice around failure. It was a choice around return on effort. Why would I go? In hindsight, I don't know. I don't know if that was the right choice or not. But it allowed me to recruit and put all my energies into the firms that I was the most interested in. And I got an offer from the top choice on my list. which at the time was a boutique firm. They focused on strategy with a technology backbone.
Mm-hmm.
People turned down McKinsey to come work for our firm in 1999 because the firm was really prominent. They did a great job of culture building and displaying what they were all about on campuses.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the .com time, .com, right?
Right. 2000.
Right. And people were captivated by that. If you flash forward a couple of years from that time period, the .com bubble burst, Y2K happened, where there was all this buildup of technology investment, and then 9/11 happened. And the result of that was many consulting firms shrank. And many of the firms that were prominent at that time actually closed their doors. By the way, that crisis was probably as prominent as this economic crisis we're in right now due to the pandemic for different reasons, but it was a crisis, right? So I'm a year out of business school. There's a massive crisis. By the end of it all, when the dust settled, there were 11 students from the University of Chicago from my starting group at my firm, and I was the last one standing. I kind of endured it all. Why did I endure it? Well, because I worked on high demand projects. I didn't work on the coolest projects.
Yeah.
I worked on high demand projects. When the CEO came to me and said, hey, we're going to try to break into the public sector. We've got this big proposal for the Chicago Transit Authority, which is the public transit system. Pam, would you go work on that? Am I going to say no to the CEO? No. No. We got a 3-year contract with them, and it kept many of us, stable. I think sexy versus high demand, those are two different things. And I chose high demand.
Yep.
That allowed me to work through and can keep my consulting job at a time when we let go of 50% of our consultants.
Wow.
Right. So, that's, there's lots of things I could say about that, but, I had this great diverse background from the work I had done at Sprint. I could deploy it. I could do finance things. I was armed with data analytics. I had all this stuff from my MBA. I had change management. I had a whole bunch of things that make you a very good consultant because you got a big bag of tricks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And you're versatile.
Yeah. And I was fairly calm because I didn't mind the ever-changing winds because I had worked in a crazy telecom industry.
Yeah.
So after 3.5 years, I was physically and mentally exhausted because I'd been trying to keep my job. I worked on really, really hard clients. It was super valuable, but it was really grueling. And I left. And I left because I had a phenomenal professional opportunity. A friend of mine from business school called me up. He said, I'm working at this very cool tech company. We're probably going to IPO in 2 years. So go public. You want to come and, help build a finance team. And so I did. It was an arduous recruiting process. But I think what they valued was that I had all this experience from Sprint working in finance.
Yeah.
I had all this experience working in consulting.
Yeah.
And so I could go deep, but I also had breadth. Yeah. And I had to interview with every executive of the company because they were all going to be my stakeholders. Because what I didn't know is that they were hiring me to build a lot of the financial planning for the IPO.
I see.
So maturity, dealing with executives, being able to be credible and being an authority was a good thing. And while I was there, the company IPO'd at the time. It was one of the most successful IPOs, I think, within a 14-month period. The company did extremely well. And I left.
IPO experience too.
What's that?
You have that IPO experience too.
Yes. I mean, I wish that I had engaged a little bit more in some of the aspects of it, but I got to build the financial plan, which is really, really important for kind of the Wall Street side of it. And I ended up leaving that company. A lot of it was leadership change, and there were some new things that they wanted to do that, myself and the person I was working for didn't really align to. So there was some conflict. Mm-hmm. I went back into consulting, and ultimately I worked for 2 more consulting firms.
Okay.
That was, if I think back on it, it was kind of stupid. I was looking to upgrade my professional experience by way of the brand of the companies. What I did not do was think about things like company culture. Mm-hmm. Who were the leaders that I was working with? What were my professional goals? What did I want to do? I mean, I really cared about money and title and what it would sound like to say I worked for a certain firm.
But don't you think that's most of the people do in the beginning of the career, that big names, job title, the growth within the job title and things like that?
Yes, I do. And I think it's okay. I mean, I was doing it at maybe a middle stage of my career. And I think when you are more seasoned, you've got to dig a level deeper.
Agree.
And the consequences, the position that you're in is different. I mean, I went to work for what was then a firm called Booz Allen Hamilton. It's now a firm called Strategy and, part of PwC. And I purely went there because I thought that the brand was going to help me in my career. I thought I would get to do way bigger projects. I thought I would get to, work with partners that were uber smart. And a good bit of that was true. It was then you realize that there are some circumstances that don't always make that work out the way that you think it will. So things that I didn't realize. One, the firm was having some internal strife because 2 divisions of the firm were in conflict with each other. That's ultimately why that firm split up. Would I have known that? I don't know. Maybe if I'd done a little more due diligence, I would have realized some of the cultural aspects. Consulting has a very apprentice-led model. The partner I went to work for was not on strong footing. That partner was actually let go from the firm about 6 months into my being hired. And so I lost a lot of my guidance, if you will. Should I have known that? I don't know, Vinod. I don't know. I maybe should have asked a few more questions. So I think, your point is right. Early in your career, some of those things don't matter.
Right.
When you're 10, 12 years into your career, you may want to be a little bit more discerning. I mean, and I talk about people, all the time now, because if I flash forward a little bit, when I left Strategy and, I was lost. I mean, here I am. I've got a fantastic career. I'm making, frankly, over $200,000 a year as a consultant.
Mhm.
I had a huge set of credentials on my resume, great work. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I was, I'd been at 3 employers in about 6 years. Each of them was hard for a different reason. I
Mhm.
hadn't connected with leaders and I felt a bit lost. And I think I had a hit to my ego. I wasn't progressing the same rate as I was earlier in my career. And I stepped back. I mean, the good thing I did is I hired a career coach. I stepped back, I did a lot of reflection. And my choice, I decided to take kind of a 2 year, what I thought was going to be a 2 year professional sabbatical. And I loved coaching, I loved mentoring. I wanted to do work that I just felt good at and a sense of fulfillment. And I went to work back at my alma mater, the University of Chicago, in the MBA career office. And it was supposed to be a 2 year, I'm going to go do this and I'm going to, kind of get my act together. I was getting married, so I had a lot of life changes and I fell in love with the work. And, that was in 2010 and it's now 2021. And I've been doing that ever since. And I think that all of those prior experiences were super valuable because what I did is I stepped back and I said, what do I love doing? And how do I make money? And how do I create a career path for myself doing what I love doing? And the last thing about it, I think when I was a consultant, I had a persona that I created as opposed to a persona that was just me. And this is just me. Everybody is really different. I think that I was trying to meet everybody else's expectations about career progression, promotion, salary, income. I wanted achievement, constant achievement. I love impact. I love making an impact. But it just felt like in order to do that, I had to be someone I was not. And I didn't like who I was. I mean, I would wake up in the morning and it's like I had to put on, a suit. I mean, and not a business suit. I had to put on this suit of a person. I had to be harsh. I had to be maybe a teeny bit ruthless at times.
Yeah.
And I think what I know now is that I was always trying to achieve more and more and more. And like, what's the next level? What's the next job? And when I started coaching, it reminded me that I didn't need to be the headline. Like all of my work was for the benefit of others. And for me, it fit really well. And I didn't have to worry about getting promoted. And I didn't have to worry about, was I doing something to build my resume? And I just did my work. I helped students. I provide my perspective, my advice. I got to research. I got to learn. I got to be creative. And after a period of time, I left the University of Chicago and I started teaching because I love teaching. And then I started building my company. And I did not know it, but when I started building my company, I realized I really like being an entrepreneur. And after more than 15 years of working with or at some of the biggest companies in the world, it occurred to me that I really like creating an organization from scratch. And I don't know why I didn't realize that earlier in my career. But looking back, my personality is way more suited to entrepreneurship than it ever was to working inside the corporate setting. And that's where I landed. So I started building, a company that was myself.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started growing, expanding. And then about 3 years ago, I repositioned the company as it is now, which is called Archer Career, to be technology focused, to be building software technology that supports people in their career advancement. Now I have a team, we're growing, we're expanding, and I get to do everything that I loved about all of my prior roles.
Okay. Yeah.
And I get to make decisions. Some of them are good, some of them might not be good. There's still a lot of things about it that are kind of yucky. Don't get me wrong. I mean, running a company on your own, running a company as a startup is really, really hard. But the big difference is I know exactly the impact I'm making. I get to be myself. And I don't have to worry about being promoted in the work I do because I'm the CEO.
Right.
And, I don't know if earlier in my career I would have been ready to be an entrepreneur. I mean, frankly, when I was in business school, I wrote 2 business plans. Either one of them could have been great startup companies, but I don't know if at that time I was ready to do it for a lot of reasons. But, flash forward 15 years and I was ready to do it. And I love it. I don't think any one decision in my career led me to where I am today. I think it was an accumulation of things. And by the way, I don't think being an entrepreneur is right for everybody.
Okay.
But I've enjoyed it to this point. And I don't know what my next job is. I don't know if I'm going to do this until I retire. I don't know if I'm going to sell the company. I don't know if we're going to be a going entity 3 years from now, but I'm totally okay with that because I love what we're doing in the moment.
Last few minutes was very impactful. And
Thanks. And, part of this, Vinod, too, is, I have a family. I have 8-year-old twin sons. I think a lot about, I was 40 when they were born.
mm-hmm.
I'm not young. And I think a lot about how am I living a complete life, which allows me to do what I want to do professionally, but do what I want to do as a parent. And as a, I have a spouse. So, he and I operate our family together. He has a very busy career. How do I, and people talk about having it all. I don't know what that is. If anybody can define that, I don't know what it is. But what I do know is that I want those pieces to fit together. And I try not to make compromises, but I do have to make trade-offs.
Yeah, sometimes one thing is important, other thing is important. And
Exactly.
You spend more time one day on one thing, and then you spend another day differently. And that's how.
Exactly. And, I talk to a lot of young women. I talk to a lot of young men. I talk to people that are soon to be parents, people that are parents.
Mm-hmm.
We all have challenges. I talk to people that aren't anywhere near being, having a spouse or being a parent, and they're still challenged to kind of find time. When I was younger, I was terrible. I mean, I'm a very, people that work with me and people that know me, I'm kind of on or off. Like when I go, I tend to go 100 miles an hour. I go all in. And that can be really great. It can also be really difficult because there were times in my life, especially early in my career, that I think I experienced burnout because it was all I did. My friends were at work. My social endeavors were at work. I had high pressure, high intensity jobs. And consulting has made it worse because that's the definition of consulting. And I had never asked myself, what were the balance of the pieces, or what was the allocation of the pieces? Now I have to do that. It's like having kids kind of forced me into it, but it's a very conscious choice. And I can feel when it's getting out of control. And then I got to, reallocate those pieces. And I think, one thing, if I could go back as a younger person, I would definitely give more thought to that 100% all the time, or the 100 miles an hour. And how do you balance some of that and have a bit more of a flow instead of just constantly running 100 miles an hour? And I think right now, for people that are starting their careers, there's such a high intensity for most people in their jobs.
Right.
It's hard not to want to do it all and want to do it fast and want to get promoted and want to make more money. And I think we want all those things, but they come with some trade-offs, right?
Yeah, I think initial 3 to 5 years is just you focus on working.
Yes.
Not thinking about promotion or not thinking about any other thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I advise people, and it's easy because I'm an advisor now. When I'm playing my role as a career coach, I'm not in the trenches, but I do manage my own career now. And I think this question of what are your goals? What are your aspirations? I think what I try to encourage people to do is to have goals that are reasonable and to have certain expectations, like a timeline, but to give yourself a little bit of flexibility. And, and this is the trick, because if you set a goal for yourself, if you give yourself too much flexibility, then you almost give yourself an excuse not to achieve that goal.
True. I want to bring you in this conversation, you brought, you refer to one point, that knowing yourself. And at some point you kind of knew that who you are and what you want, right? And I think with the career, with everything, there is a time when you have to kind of soul search and find who you are and what you really want. And that's not an easy process. It's a very difficult process to be able to find who you are and what you want.
Oh, it's a very difficult process. Very difficult. I think it's difficult in your 20s. I mean, just in general, you don't know who you are. It's, although I say that, and then I think to myself, I actually meet some people in their 20s that really have their act together. Impressive. I think that even though it's hard, you have to be persistent. And what do? I think it's a matter of asking some questions. One question would be, are you making choices because of what others want or because of what you want?
Yeah.
I think that's a very important question. You know, parents are a very powerful influence, friends are a very powerful influence. Um, you know, it's cliche, it's a lot of talk these days, but social media is a very powerful influence. And it's okay to ask yourself why you're making certain choices. I made choices because my parents, especially my mom, was a very important part of my life. She cared a lot about my career. She cared a lot about me.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted maybe an easier life than she had had, and she and my dad. And out of the goodness of them and their hearts and as parents, you know, they wanted something better for their kid.
Definitely.
And that places a lot of pressure on us. But I think it's the knowing it's not about whether that's bad or good. It's just knowing that you're making certain choices and what those trade-offs are. I think that's one thing. I think the second thing, to create that awareness, I would ask, and I do this now, I ask myself, how tired am I?
Okay.
And I think what happens is when you've got to put on that suit, you got to put on that persona, it's tiring. It's physically tiring because you're doing things a certain way that it's almost a bit like acting. And when we are extremely tired, one of the reasons for it could be that we're constantly having to put on a persona that isn't our natural self. And, you know, the third question probably has to do with, do you understand why you are doing what you're doing? And it depends on what you care about. And this may go into values. So like most people, I mean, I value income. I mean, I don't work for free. I intentionally don't work in the social sector. I intentionally don't work in nonprofits. I am capitalist. I've always worked in the private sector. I now have a company that could have been a nonprofit, but we are not. And I have a certain desire for a standard of living, and I'm very comfortable with that. So I don't take money off the table, but I also think that certain people's motivations around money, it's really on quite a wide spectrum. Some people are highly, highly motivated by money. That is fine to a certain degree, as long as you're not cheating and lying and stealing and all that good stuff. But I think it's like knowing yourself,
Yeah.
and what that means and what are the trade-offs associated with it. And then there's the flip side where I will have people say to me, I'm not motivated at all. And therefore, they're unwilling to maybe speak to an employer about a salary offer. And then flash forward, you find that the salary doesn't fit, you know, a personal budget. That creates stress. It creates tension. It creates conflict. You know, there's a whole bunch of things. I think that is just an example of, you really need to know what your values are and what is the impact that you're trying to make. And when I get lost for a period of time, for a day, I step back and I ask myself, what is the impact of my work? What am I trying to do? And for me, I mean, I'm very fortunate because for me, it's very clear. I want to help people get jobs. And then I want people to get better jobs. And then when people are in those jobs, I want them to go as far as their aspirations will take them. And if I'm not doing those three things, whatever I'm doing, I shouldn't be doing. And I'll give you an example, Vinod. So I've taught for many years. I've been in the classroom. I've been a full-time professor. I've been an adjunct. I love teaching. I mean, I really do. And I had to give it up. And it was very hard for me to do it. I had to give it up during the pandemic. It was hard to teach online. And I knew that I wasn't doing it as well as I could. I have two kids that at the time were in second grade. It required a lot more attention with my family. And then I'm running a company in the middle of a pandemic. And the class I taught, even though it was oriented around career, in the things that I know that I need to do in my business with our current clients and the growth and my team and my family, like I had to pluck that out because I just didn't have the time to dedicate to it. And it was hard. I mean, I miss it. I probably, felt a sense of joy doing that. That's a little different than my work. But at the end of the day, I was having to put on like, oh, I get to be a professor. And it was sort of me, feeding a little bit of my ego. Right. And so I think that those choices become much easier when you ask yourself those tough questions. What am I doing and why?
Yeah.
Am I being the persona that I really feel comfortable? Am I making choices for others or myself?
Great information. This interview is full of information. We have last 4 minutes left. So I wanted to ask your message to the audience. But before I do that, a very rapid question. How do you manage your time? Is it a paper-based list or some application-based list?
I do three things. So yes, I have paper. I have a collection of these. I have an online project management system that we use called Basecamp. And then I have a calendar, and those three things all come together. And I'll give myself like an 88% goodness at time management. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I use multiple systems. I have a very complex schedule. So it's important to do that because I deal with clients.
Yeah.
But I do think that, I mean, it's good you asked that question. Learning time management is a really, really valuable skill. So everybody should give attention to that, especially early in your career. Because if you don't do it early, it gets harder as you get more along the later stages in life and all that other stuff.
Definitely. So your message to people who are in their early career and trying to visualize what they could become in 5, 10 years from now?
I think it's first aspire to greatness. I want people to dream and have really big dreams and do great things and contribute to society, contribute to a community, contribute to something. I don't think you should avoid dreaming. I think the second message is be patient. We want everything so fast. And when you're 20, your career is going to be 30 plus years. It's not set in stone. What you do in your 20s won't probably be the thing you're doing in your 50s. If you keep building skills and relationships, you can evolve. And the thing about that, maybe the last message is people and relationships are really, really important. You need people to support you. You need people to advise you. You need people to give you tough messages. When you're having a bad day, you need somebody to talk to pep you up. And no degree is going to give you that. No training course is going to give you that. So, dream and aspire to do great things, work at it, but put in a little patience, and then have an amazing group of people around you that can support you in multiple facets, right? Not always good. Sometimes it's tough, but people that really champion for you, because I think we know right now in the world around us, things are tough, and you need that support system just to help you be the best version of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today, Pam.
You're welcome. Good luck with this. All right. I look forward to seeing it.